Welcome to the first ever, and probably last ever, Rowan podcast. Today's topic, old media, and what it was like to experience growing up around it. Getting to the meat of the matter, we'll be exploring the past of one Mrs. Ziegler, as she recounts her experiences growing up with technology from the 60s to 70s-ish. We'll be covering the records, radios, television, and cinema of her youth. Unfortunately, I did forget to record introductions, but in essence, we had a one-on-one interview, which I have some lovely clips for you to listen to as I take you through a little trip to the past. And a little side note, adding to that, some of the clips are a bit jarring, and I'll only be playing the first half. But there should be enough information to get the gist of it. So here on our first slide, we basically talked about music and records, what kind of music she listened to, how her parents reacted to it, just generally. What Mrs. Ziegler talked about was she had a lot of freedom with what she listened to. Her parents weren't particularly strict, and she shared the record player with her family. And yeah, also another note to add was the incredible cheapness. It says $2, but we figured it was about $1.50 for each record, which by today's standard is absolutely amazing. So here's a short clip from that.
Yes, I did listen to records. Oh gosh, well, when I was a kid, Peter and the Wolf, Peter Pan, they were stories on records. And then when I got older, the Monkees. I had other records, but I know the Monkees. I think that's all I can remember right now. When I had it was a white portable record player that I had. And then when we were younger, there was a stereo, I remember a stereo record player too. No, I really didn't have, my parents never set any specific rules for the music we listened to.
Nice.
So I never really got into I listened to a few records, few songs, but I don't remember getting into the music like my brother did. He was 8-track. Well, that's really dating it.
Probably not at night.
Yeah, probably not through midnight. But no, we could play music whenever we wanted.
Nice.
Where were we?
Yes.
Okay.
And again, sorry for some jarring in the video clip. I basically cut out the questions I asked her, which are along the side here in the bullet points you can see. So our next section was talking about radio. We got into it a bit. Her family had little portable radios in the main house, and then obviously within the car they had a lot of radio. We talked a little bit about like fighting with your siblings over the radio, and then just listening to the radio during road trips and listening to it in general. She did say there was a few different programs. Let's say that might have been in TV. Gosh, we talked about Captain Kangaroo, I believe. And when she was younger, DJ had said that Captain Kangaroo, a character, had died, and that it kind of traumatized her. So that was fun to listen to. So yeah, and then talked a little bit about jingles. She made the point about how jingles were more musical back then, and then we covered it a bit more in movies. So here's the clip.
I remember my dad turning on the radio at 6 in the morning so he could listen to the morning news before he went to work. And you could hear it all the way up the stairs. So if you out every day, you can hear the radio and the news. And then traveling in the car, he would have the radio. And then we'd fight over the radio station.
As you do.
As brothers and sisters do.
Mm-hmm.
Usually entertainment songs. Let's see, by the 70s, no, they still had radio programs. By the time I was into the radio, it was more music. From The Greatest American Hero, they would play the greatest hits from the different songs that were around at that time. They would have a countdown.
So glad nothing has changed.
At that time, it was mostly music that I listened to. Oh, I remember, as a kid, and I was so upset. I heard on the radio that one of the TV shows they had was called Captain Kangaroo.
Oh, yeah.
And so on the radio, I heard the guy said that Captain Kangaroo died, and I was so upset that he died. And so I told my mom. And thinking back now, I think it was just some guy joking on the radio, but to a little kid, that was tragic.
Very traumatic.
Very traumatic to find that Captain Kangaroo died. I think in the 80s, they started with the smoking. Smoking's bad for you. And yeah. But I don't know if it was educational. Maybe it was more entertainment. Harrison Keeler, I remember listening to him. The other one, Focus on the Family, they had Adventures in Odyssey. Yeah, I remember listening to it on the radio. Now it's
So coming up on TV and cable, um, when she was little, um, her father would turn on the TV and they would dance to Lawrence Welk, which was, I believe, a TV host with a big band um, back in the 60s and 70s. She was born around mid 60s for the time frame. And she talked about really loving Little House on the Prairie. A little bit later, she talked about how she even had her mom make a dress for her with a bonnet and everything. And then we really went over rabbit ears, which are, uh, gosh, I guess you can't see my pointer. But on the TV here, the antennae that stick out, is two antennae sewed rabbit ears. And that if you didn't get it perfect, um, your signal would just go kaput. And then one little memory she has is when she had her own personal box TV, which was TVs back then were huge boxes, as you'll listen, but just a big box. How do I describe it? About, oh gosh, like a squat shoebox, if you can imagine. I'm sure some people have them, but her own personal tiny quote unquote TV that her sister broke when she went to college. So here's the clip from that.
For us, as a kid, is we had the TVs that they have nowadays are nothing but they had. Way back in the TVs were huge boxes that either sat on the floor or in a special console, and we had rabbit ears, which were basically antennas that you connected, of course, up to the TV so you could catch the radio waves or the band waves, whatever, to get the program. So you had to adjust the antennas to get the show on the TV. Then, let's see, we moved and we still had, they call them the rabbit ears. And then when I became junior high, maybe fifth or sixth grade, we moved, came out with cable. Well, I'm sure they had it before then, but we didn't get cable till I was in there. And then it was just the cable. We didn't have dish or satellite or anything like that. We just had the main stations. Okay, my first TV program,
or one that was you just remember from earliest childhood.
Okay, earliest childhood would have been Sesame Street. Scooby-Doo was one that we used to watch. So that was way back in, I would say, the 70s. Little House on the Prairie was a big one, which I fought my brothers and sisters because they always wanted to watch MASH. No, Little House on the Prairie. and then my dad would watch, Lawrence Welk was another one that when I was younger, about 7, 8, my dad would turn on Lawrence Welk and they would have the band and stuff playing and we'd dance around the living room before they made us go to bed. For us,
And finally, moving on to movies and cinema. So I guess not so much similar to today, except for if you replace it with phones. But when she was a little kid, the television was, as you see here, the centerpiece of the home. So basically, it dominated life. You'd always be on. You'd like go in and out of the room, but a television was really, really popular by this time. Um, and then we went over a little bit of jingles, how they're more musical than they are today. And as they slowly went on, the commercials got less and less musical and more just talkative. One thing that was really interesting was, at least where she was, drive-ins were more common to see than just regular movie theaters. Movie theaters were obviously popular, and it was probably about 50-50, but drive-in movie theaters were just easier to get, especially in rural areas. So it's interesting to have seen a decline in that. And then a little side piece, because this clip is fairly long, so we definitely won't get to it. But we were talking about satellite. In her early childhood, she got rabbit ears, and then around middle school, she got cable. But satellite was incredibly expensive, and part of the reason of that is because satellite dishes weren't the size of regular plates of a plate that you see now. Satellite dishes were enormous, about this bigger than a blow-up pool. Definitely not as deep, but pretty big, about the size of a small car, actually. If you ever get to see an old satellite dish, I definitely suggest it because they are massive. You've probably seen them at your grandparents' house. But yeah, so she mostly had rabbit ears and then cable in her life. And then she had the great fortune of being able to see Star Wars. That was the major movie. So Star Wars and Bambi when she was younger, Star Wars when she was older in like high school, or maybe when she was 13. Um, but yeah, so here's a little clip from that part.
I think TV, as a kid, I don't remember it changing too much, but I think the TV kind of dominated the home life because it was constantly on.
Yeah, I can see that.
In the evening, yeah, I think it dominated. They would have the show, and then they would go to the commercial, and I remember the commercials, they had more jingles to them, more jingles than like today's commercials. They pretty much just tell you. They're more talkative, whereas back when I was growing up, they were more musical, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Commercials, I mean, they're always trying to sell you. I know they had singing ones, and then over time, they became more talkative. I'm just trying to think of some of the commercials. I mean, they did their products, and yeah, I can't remember too many of them. Yeah, I don't remember if it was a show or a commercial, but I remember, I guess they didn't have zip codes when I was younger.
Huh.
But they had a commercial, and they sang, was it something? I remember they had telling people you have to put zip codes on your envelopes. When you mail stuff, you have to have zip codes now. And I remember about zip codes. Yeah, I just remember, and I thought, thinking back to how strange. But yeah, I do remember that they encouraged people to put zip codes on their mail, because I don't know if they didn't used to do that before or what.
Interesting.
Yeah. Like I said, in the late 60s, early 70s, I guess if you were rich, you probably could have cable. But we had the rabbit ears. You had to have the antennas to get a program. And so we had the antennas, and then it went to cable. So you had to have cable in order to get, you could get a good station. And then from cable came satellite. And so you could get a satellite dish. But we never did, because it was, at that time, I mean, these satellite dishes were huge, bigger than what they have now.
Yeah.
So if you wanted a satellite, it would go in your front yard and take up half your front yard. Massive and huge compared to nowadays they're little tiny that can go on your roof. Or,
yeah, they just look like a plate.
Yeah. So the dish themselves have changed.
I always wondered why we had just that massive dish.
Well, I guess at the time they didn't have the technology that they have now, and they worked with what they had. I think
It's been a wonderful experience having you here for our tour of media from the past, but I must say goodbye and good night.
So, as a
It's been a
closing
wonderful
to the closing,
experience having you
just
here
to
for our
add
tour of
things.
media from the past.
I hope you enjoyed
but I
it.
must say
I
goodbye
hope it was
and good
informative.
night.
Someday I might post the full-length interview, but for now this is just part of the project. So yeah, have a good day and thank you for listening.